So now let's go over cloth simulation. So cloth simulation is also one of the things in Blender that is easily to be added, easily to kind of set the simple setup for it, but it can get complicated if you really want to get into it. So let's click Shift A and let's add a plane, and let's click G and Z and then scale it up in here. So I'm just going to create a big plane that we're going to use for cloth simulation. Now, one thing that we're going to have to do right away is that cloth simulation is simulated on the points. So since we don't have many points on this plane, it won't look, it will look like a square moving basically, because we don't have vertices that are actually interacting with the object. So what we want to do is basically add more detail to this plane. So let's click on the modifiers, add subdivision surface, and let's add something like this. Now we don't want this shape for our cloth, we want simple. And we can apply or not apply, but we can see how, let's see. We basically have now more detail. I thought it will show it in the wireframe, but now we have about 16 times more detail, something like that. I guess we can apply to just see how it looks. Not too bad, we can also add some more detail later, but for now that should be fine. So let's click Ctrl Z to bring it back. And now let's go to physics settings, and then we can click on cloth. And just by doing this, we should be able to see some cloth animation. Now you can see it goes through our object, and we don't want that, so we can click on our object, click on collision, and now it should be collidable with our cloth. So we can basically see what happens. Now our cloth has so little detail that it kind of does not work exactly how we want it to, so let's add more detail to it. So I'm going to click this 2 times more. Now it looks kind of broken because it is not baked again, so we need to set it to 0 and play it again. And now we can see the cloth simulation working decently. Now there is already some problems with it. So one thing is that it goes through itself. So if I go a bit back, I think I noticed, yeah, you can see stuff going through each other, which we don't want. So to fix that is we're going to have to go to cloth settings and then scroll all the way down and go to collisions. And the fix is pretty simple. We can just enable self collisions, and the current default settings should be fine where it looks good enough. So let's test it out. And now we can see it does not pierce through each other. So this side before would be piercing through, but right now it's working fine. So with a simple click, we can see it looks way better. Also, we can click on object and shade smooth. This can just make it look a bit better. There is still some issues since this is a big square that you can work on later, but for kind of the basic show off, this is fine. Of course, you can also change render, maybe render subdivision to maybe 7 or something if you want better quality for later, but for testing, for real time, I would just want to keep it a bit low so we can see the changes that we make in real time. So this is kind of the basic setup. Now let's go to the settings again and see what we can change. So first thing, yeah, we can just change this to, let's say, 6. So this is 4 times more detail, and we can already see some FPS drops. And since we did not triangulate this mesh, it kind of looks weird, but if you triangulate this, it would look way better. So triangulation basically means to create something like this. You create a face, and then you just need to create it to go along the cloth where it's basically bending. But for now, we are just going to leave it like this. And we can see with more details, we can see more creases and stuff like that. So I think we have pretty decent FPS with this, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to use this quality setting. But let's go back to the settings. So first we have quality settings, quality steps. So increasing this will of course increase the quality of the simulation, so it will become more accurate, less collisions, less weird behavior, but you're gonna increase some performance, so I would leave this as is. So there is vertex mass, so each vertex, what is the mass of that vertex, some settings. these stiffness values can be important, so depending how you want your cloth to look like. So if you increase the stiffness, we can see how it's a bit more like a thick rubber. So if I increase this to, let's say, 30, let's see how it looks. You can see how it looks more like a rubber instead of cloth. So you can kind of change the look of your, or the feel of your cloth depending on what you want to do. So maybe setting this to 40. Doesn't change much. So there is settings for that. There is damping. So if I increase this, we can see a bit of change with creases, but nothing much there. We can also do internal springs, but this gets more complicated because you need vertex groups for this. So let's go to pressure. Pressure is something that that basically it will kind of hold your object in place, because the pressure is being put on the middle part of your object. So if you want kind of cloth to stay similarly placed where it is, but maybe just move a little bit, you can use pressure. We can do even a really small pressure if you don't want it too much, to get something like this. So let's disable that. We have cache, so if you want to pre-bake your simulation, this is good if you maybe want to increase the quality, bake it, see if it's good or not, then increase the quality more, bake it. So instead of going frame by frame, rendering it like I'm doing in here, you can just pre-bake it and then watch later. Maybe it would take like, let's say, an hour. You don't want to just click space and watch frame by frame. After the cache, you have a shape. The shape can be interesting, where what we can do with shape is, if you go to our first frame, so we can see everything, we can select these 2 points. And let's go to our vertex groups, click plus and assign. Now these 2 vertices are in this group, and if you go back to our cloth, we can scroll all the way back to the shape and click on the group. And now if we simulate, we can see that our object has, so since we subdivided it, all of these points are kind of pinned, but I just want to pin these 2. So this is kind of the problem with subdivision, where it kind of thinks that we want this whole half to be pinned. So I'm going to apply the subdivision, so we have all of this detail. And then I'm just going to select these 2 points, delete our old group, create a new one, and assign. And now let's try to play it. We can see now it works the same as before, but we did not apply the group in the shape. So let's try it. Now we can see only the corners are pinned, which gives us this really nice like drape type animation, where we can just attach 2 points if they are connected to something and animate it like this. Of course, you can use any vertices anywhere. We can also do something like this. In our group, we can do these 2 if we want also. And now the animation would look like this. So it all depends on basically what you want. So I'm going to remove this from the group, so we only have the 2 other ones. Now let's go back to the settings. So that is the shape. Of course, you have the stiffness, shrinking factor, stuff like that, but we won't touch it. You have also the collision quality. So if we increase this, the collision with this cube will be better. And if we change self collisions, we can also increase the quality of collision with itself. So we can see how now the corners are better. If you remember before, it was kind of piercing through a bit. So increasing the quality will fix that, but of course always keep in mind frame rate will start dropping more and more the more you increase the quality. And the last thing that we are going to go over is field weights. So whenever you have some fields or some forces in your scene, you can choose how it affects this this cloth simulation. So if I, let's say, add let's say wind, we add it in here, we rotate it so it kind of blows in the direction of the cape, and let's set the strength to, let's say, 200. if you try to simulate, we can see how the cloth is pushed a bit by the wind. I can even increase this more to, let's say, 600. So we can see how the wind is pushing the cloth, and the cloth is now even barely falling onto our cube. But let's say we want this specific cloth to have a weaker response to the wind. We can decrease it here. So if we decrease it in here, we can see it falls more onto the cube. It still kind of gets affected by wind, but half as much. So this is where field weights come in handy, where you can kind of manipulate each cloth to your needs, so it reacts a bit differently. So yeah, that's about it for cloth. This is kind of the good place to start, and you can experiment with more and more options to get the exact cloth effect that you want.